Hello, welcome back to the channel. It is a sunny 36 degrees here in Stellenbosch, South Africa. I hope you've had an epic December with the family. Hopefully, you could switch off for a bit. And I hope you're as pumped as I am for 2026. It's going to be a massive year for AI and tech. But today, I want to chat to you about this protocol that I've been monitoring for the past couple of months, and that's called x402. And it's relevant to what we are personally building at Allocate, which is the payment rails for AI agents and AI agent commerce. And I stumbled on this really sick dashboard called x402 Scan that tracks everything that's happening on this internet native payment protocol. And the numbers are, they're kind of insane if you look at the scale of the adoption that's happening right now. 61 million transactions, over $8 million in volume, and that's happening every single day. This protocol about 4 months ago, I think, was doing a total of $10,000, which is just insane. And I think to understand why this matters, you kind of have to go back to 1996. If you are a little bit of an internet nerd like I am, I think you might enjoy learning a little bit more about this protocol history. So it's an HTTP 402 request, payment required. It's a status code like, 404, which is an error code or unauthorized. 402 was reserved for payment back in the day. So Tim Berners-Lee and Mark Andreessen thought payment should be native to how the internet and the web worked. But here's the problem. Micropayments, they didn't exist. Credit cards charge 30 cents minimum per transaction. If you want to charge someone, fractions for an API call, you lose money on that fee, 3 to 4% per credit card charges, as we know. So what ended up happening? I mean, this is kind of almost the birthplace of internet ads. It almost filled that gap, right? Like Google figured out that you could monetize attention instead of charging for per unit resources. So X402 kind of just sat there unused for 30 years essentially. And you can kind of see obviously how that played out in terms of monetizing internet resources through ads. I mean, every website now is a pop-up, it's paywalls, it's cookies. Thank you very much, Europe and the GDPR. Like it's just subscription wars. Like you try to read an article. I mean, when's the last time you read an article? It's just insane. The pop-up ads, the user experience is terrible, and that's because there's just no way to charge almost like a fraction for that resource. And obviously, the seller wants to monetize their data, which could be an article, right? Like the payment infrastructure didn't exist, so almost the sellers had to monetize the attention and the traffic instead through ads. But what if you could charge a fraction without a subscription? So no account, you click, you pay, you abstract that resource. And that's what micro payments were supposed to enable. And that's where X402 potentially could finally make that possible. Like obviously it's the convergence of stable coins and L2 layers that can settle transaction in milliseconds. The economics can finally work as we move to a more on-chain kind of internet native space. And I was looking at the network breakdown on X402 Scan, epic resource. Once again, go check it out. And the base network is doing about 1.2 million transactions a day, almost $50,000 in total transaction volume. Solana is doing around 820,000 transactions with $75,000 in volume. So larger payments on average on the Solana network. But both chains are live, active, and definitely scaling super fast. And I think the interesting thing is thinking through who this actually affects. Like, why is this relevant as a new software protocol? If you're a SaaS company charging $1,000 a month for API access, that model worked because there was kind of no alternative. The overhead of billing small amounts was too high, so you did enterprise contracts, annual commitments. These are kind of standard protocols for enterprise B2B sales. But now a small developer can pay per call. You don't need to commit $12,000 a year to test your API. Those 6 month beta testing contracts, we all love those. You could spend $5, see if it works, scale it up if it does. You pay per usage. Or if you think about data enrichment, right? Like LinkedIn data, social graphs, contact information, that stuff costs $50,000 a year through official channels if it's high quality. I'm not talking about just an Apollo.io. There's a whole industry being built and always has been built around access to data. So with X402, someone can expose that data at a cent per lookup, essentially per API call. No enterprise contract, no sales call, just pay to get access to the potential inference and data. And this is where it gets super exciting. And I think the real convergence could potentially hyperscale this protocol, and that's with AI agents. Like if you're looking to, if you're building a Claude code, you're getting these amazing sequences of tool calls that follow that tool call analysis, and they can execute reasoning through multi-step tasks, call APIs, process responses, adapt and make decisions based off of those responses. EXA is an amazing resource that I use for search and for research. But what if there was an economic payment layer that the AI agent harness could access? Like, you can't give access to an AI agent to your credit card. You wouldn't want to. But if your agent, let's say, for example, wants to hit 50 different APIs to do a task, enrichment APIs, inference APIs, data, you're not signing 50 contracts and setting up 50 accounts. Like, is there more room for it to scale that inference? What x402 does, it potentially flips that for AI agents in a sense. Let's say, for example, you give an AI agent access to a wallet. It spends a cent on each API. It evaluates the results, finds the one that works. It extracts that data, and it loads it up, and that produces a high quality output. So no contracts, no accounts. Payment is essentially the authentication. Obviously, there needs to be guardrails, and there needs to be, a human interaction to approve those transactions. But I mean, the thing that matters is that there's potential for no chargebacks. With credit cards, every transaction can be disputed, every wire can be clawed back. There's this whole layer of trust and verification that has to happen. That's a part of the massive valuation behind companies like Stripe. But the power of stablecoins is once it settles on chain, it's done. The server has the money, so you can build these permissionless payment flows where the only thing that matters is, did the payment go through, and is it trackable on chain? If you're building an AI product right now and your agent needs to do research, it needs to pull data from multiple sources, call inference APIs, access gated content, you're stitching together API keys, and you kind of you're managing the billing across 10 different platforms. And as we know, it does start to stack up if you're using various different API plugins, especially for things like, Claude Code. Could we imagine that something like the x402 protocol, where your agent has access to an on-chain wallet, you set the budget, you let it run, it figures out which APIs give you the best result for that cost per result? And that's kind of a completely different way of building. You're not locked into different vendor subscriptions. You're not managing these different accounts. You're kind of just paying for the pure outcomes of what you're getting access to for your AI agent. And I think that's the thing to wrap your head around is, does this open up a new type of business model that goes beyond SaaS into a pure AI agent commerce play? Like, subscriptions exist because micropayments didn't work and they weren't essentially feasible with the infrastructure. Paywalls exist because you couldn't charge per article. Obviously, enterprise contracts exist because billing small amounts was too expensive and it didn't logically make sense. But all of that infrastructure was kind of built around the limitations of, I guess, credit card processing and the trust and variability of that in the early days of, the web. And I think that's the exciting thing, is those limitations, they don't exist on chain. So you're going to see media companies experimenting with pay per article. Maybe, I don't know much about the media space. I'm more excited about API providers offering pay per call alongside subscriptions. It doesn't have to remove subscriptions. Can it be a tool for creators monetizing directly without ads over and above a subscription option? I think the reason I'm paying attention to this is because it's directly relevant to what we are building with Allocate. The whole thesis is that the internet native founder needs to have payment rails that work at internet speed for cross-border payments. You need to have a high velocity for moving and allocating your capital. And the agent economy is going to need essentially the same thing. It needs to be able to transact at the speed of the internet. If AI agents are going to have economic agency, which I think at this point is honestly inevitable, they need a way to pay for things. And on-chain rails are the only ones that require kind of identity. They don't require that kind of identity verification per se. And I'm just excited about the pure growth in this protocol. I mean, I don't know exactly how it all sort of shakes out. It's like any new technology. It's super early. It's experimental. There's lots of risks. But when a protocol is scaling this fast, I think it's worth paying attention to, especially as a builder and a business owner. If you want to see the data yourself, once again, check out x402scan.com. You can watch kind of the transactions in real time. And I think, just to reflect on what this could potentially mean if you are building a software company, a SaaS business, or you're an internet creator, it's a potential new business model for you to collect payments from customers, to monetize your work, to monetize your inference and data. It's about having an open mind and saying, is it worth looking at these payment protocols? Because what does the world look like when there is an agent economy? If an AI agent has a payment layer in which it can execute within its tool call, what does that mean in terms of traditional subscription models for SaaS? How do you price in having AI agents as customers of your product? And I think this is worth paying attention to. But thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next one.